You're just showing your patriotism.
I am America. Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Happy Hour podcast. I am your host, Ricky Valero. On today's episode, we are going to take a look at Week 8 in the National Football League, from fantasy football start sit to Matthew Fox's favorite games of the week, to some bets that I like, to some DFS plays, and then we top it off with a little bit of the movie corner. As always, joined by my partner here, Mr. Matthew Fox. How are you today, sir?
Doing all right. You know, it's been a little chilly here, and I have some sinus stuff going on. Still in the midst of a remodel, but it's far enough along that I can return to my blank void for recording.
I'll be honest with you. I never thought your remodel was ever going to get done. I feel like
it's not done.
Well, you wouldn't see the progress. You're right. You're not done yet. The progress of where you're at right now. Let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that word for you. You know what I mean? But yeah, I didn't think that we would be here to see this side of the world from you ever again. But before we dive into some of our favorite plays, we do have the old Packers and Cardinals on the schedule tonight. It's going to be interesting to see because the Packers are rolling out, I think Sterling Sharp, Greg Jennings is coming out of Donald Driver's coming back. I feel like they don't have a single receiver playing tonight.
Well, any more COVID injuries, and they may ask you if you can hop a plane.
Hey, I might be able to get. It's Aaron Rodgers. He's made a lot worse look better. So I feel like I've got an opportunity to at least catch one or two balls. I'm gonna ask him to not. I can't go across the middle. I'm too old to take those hits, man. One of those hits, I might be out for the rest of my life. So not really feeling good about it. The line for the night's +6.5. The Packers. A lot of people love the Packers line at +6.5. I'm staying away from this game completely because, honestly, would it surprise me if Aaron Rodgers wins this game? No. Would it surprise me if the Cardinals blow out the Packers? Also no. So I really just don't want any part of this game.
That's a man who's confident in the outcome.
I just don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. And that scares me more than anything across the board. So any quick thoughts on tonight's game for you?
Yeah, well, hopefully MVS will get activated from IR, and that'll give him one. If that happens, then he and Randall Cobb are probably decent flex plays. Because they're going to have to throw to somebody. I think this is going to be a big Aaron Jones game because he can not only run but play receiver. Also, in the past, Robert Tonyan has thrived when Devontae Adams has been out. So this might be one of the rare weeks this season where I'm telling you that I think Robert Tonyan's back to being a tight end one. For Arizona, the word came out, J.J. Watt likely done for the year, has to have surgery. That's kind of a blow to their defense. Even if he's not the skill level he once was, the presence and the leadership is a big loss. DeAndre Hopkins, banged up, is questionable. 70% of DeAndre Hopkins is better than 100% of most of the guys out there. So if he plays, I'm still playing him. But you want to probably moderate expectations. I wouldn't be surprised if they lean on Zach Ertz again this week. He's been in a little bit of a groove. He's a good veteran presence, trying to go over the middle on that Packers defense. I think it's going to be a good game. I am actually picking the Packers to win.
Yeah, are you picking them to win? I like it. I do think that the loss of Watt is going to hurt that team overall. You know what I mean? I really do feel like it's going to hinder that team, and it's not going to really help them along the way. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't. Again, that's why I'm not betting this game. That's why I'm staying away from this game. I have no confidence in this. I still don't believe this Arizona team's as good as they are. I still have my question marks. Their back end is playing light years better than I think any of us expected them to. They've had some really good corner play, which has helped them up front. You know what I mean? So Chandler Jones, I think Chandler Jones missed last week's game, or was it the week before? But
I think it was last week.
Yeah, so he missed. He'll be back. I believe he'll be back this week. So that's good for them. But it's going to be interesting to see what the presence of the lack of presence of what J.J. Watt does to that defense. Because like you said, he's not as good as he once was, but he still demands a presence on the football field and was still wrecking a little bit of havoc. So I'm very intrigued by that. But with that being said, go ahead and break us down the games of the week for you. Fox takes one from the morning, the late window, the night game, and then, of course, talks about Monday Night Football, and then talks about who he thinks is going to win these football games. So give us what you got, man.
Yeah, slightly better slate than we had last week. There are a couple intriguing morning window games or early window games on Sunday. The one that I'm going to highlight is Pittsburgh Steelers 3-3 coming off a bye at the Cleveland Browns 4-3. These AFC North games are always tremendous battles. These two teams are actually chasing the Bengals and the Ravens right now. It's going to be a crucial game. Pittsburgh kind of clawed its way back to 500. Still, no Juju Smith-Schuster. Still some questions about their passing game. The Browns have been totally beat up. They got a nice 10 days off prior to this game. Nick Chubb's projecting to be back. They think Baker Mayfield's actually going to play too. I don't know if that's a great idea, but I think whether it's him or Case Keenum, if they can get Chubb back and they can get Dearness Johnson running strong, they have a good chance to win. I actually think Cleveland gets it done at home and stays in the race. I'm not a huge believer in the Steelers right now, despite my love of Najee Harris and my thought that Deontay Johnson is probably a top 12 wide receiver. The late window game on Sunday is an NFC South battle. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers 6-1. They had one hiccup against the Rams in Los Angeles, but otherwise they've been rolling despite massive amounts of injuries to the back end of that defense. The New Orleans Saints, a surprising 4-2. It looks like they have a chance to be activating Michael Thomas off PUP, which means that in consecutive weeks they would have gotten Traquan Smith and potentially Michael Thomas back. They also traded for Mark Ingram to repair him with Alvin Kamara to give them a little thunder lightning. Their defense has played really well this season. The offense has been inconsistent and erratic, but if they can start getting some of these pieces back, they would be poised for a playoff run. I don't think it happens here. I still think Tom Brady is too much. Antonio Brown not tracking to play, but it looks like we may get Rob Gronkowski back. I'm going to be honest, it doesn't matter. The Buccaneers were loaded at all of the positions. They can suffer one or two guys being out in a week and still be just fine. They're still going to have Godwin, Evans, Leonard Fournette. Still going to be probably a pretty good fantasy day. And Tom Brady, I mean, he looks like mid-30s Tom Brady still. Sunday night game, another good one. Two teams coming off of a bye week. The Dallas Cowboys 5-1. They've been red hot. They are on track to get Michael Gallup back, which just gives them one more passing weapon at the Vikings. Vikings have clawed their way back to 3-3. Dalvin Cook said the bye hit just the right time to boost him up and get him fully healthy. Probably a bad sign for Dallas, but a good thing for Minnesota. Minnesota is by no means out of the playoff race, and they have a lot of veterans that would probably like to get there. I think this has potential to be a fun and explosive offensive game. It'll also be interesting to see if Trayvon Diggs can keep that interception streak going. He had at least one in each of the first 6 games the Cowboys played. I like this one. I think the Cowboys gave them a chance to get a little healthy. Dak had gotten dinged up a little. Elliott had gotten dinged up. Cooper was still trying to rehab that ankle. Both these teams come in fresh off of a bye. I expect this to be a fun Sunday night game. Monday night, all I can say is maybe you can fire up the Manning Brothers broadcast, get a few jokes, get a few stories. We have Eli's old team, the Giants, who are 2-5. It's always an open question about whether they're going to give Daniel Jones any receivers. No question that Daniel Jones will be blamed entirely for every loss they have, regardless of how he plays. I mean, dude was out there running, catching a freaking pass of the year last year, throwing the ball to Dante Pettis and making him look like a professional NFL receiver. Gets no respect. Chiefs really need a get-right game. They're 3-4. They got blown out by the Titans last week. They're in last place in the AFC West. Probably not what Chiefs fans were expecting of a team that's been in 3 straight AFC Championship games. I think they'll probably get a win here, but every time we think the Chiefs are about to cruise to an easy victory, they seem to find a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So I guess we'll just hang loose. Hopefully Patrick Mahomes does better than last week. I still have him as QB2 this week, but when you're looking for a Monday Night Miracle and you see those Chiefs on there, do you think you're going to get it? If you roll out and get like a collective 15 points from him and Hill and Kelsey, that probably won't get it done.
Yeah, so for me, I'll transition to my bets in just a second. I'll throw the loop off first just a little bit, but I am not betting on the Chiefs for a to be determined lengthy period of time, because I've been rather heavy on these guys over the last couple weeks, and I'm kind of tired of I'm tired of losing money because of them. That's where it starts. But every week, like you say, every week I'm like, this is the week that you're going to take it over. You know what I mean? Like this week I had them on my bets. You know what I mean? Last week's bets were Eagles over 3.5 points in the first quarter. Looked good. Came out the gate, scored 7 points, got on the board. They won the bet, and then they didn't score again until the fourth quarter. So my plus 5.5 didn't hit. My Colts plus 5.5 was a monster. Smash that. Colts 49ers over 44. I hit that as well. Burrow over 1.5 touchdowns. I hit that. Tannehill over the 1 interception. I hit that as well. And then, of course, the Chiefs let me down. Last week I was 5-2. I'm starting to get in the groove here. I feel like I'm getting in a little bit of a groove. I'm kind of digging it a whole lot. Obviously, I'm digging it a whole lot because it means I'm winning money, and I'm also hopefully winning other people money. But with that being said, my bets this week, I've got actually 7 plays for you guys this week. So I went a little bit more. I might be going crazy, but it is what it is. But I got a few bets for you guys. I like the Steelers plus 4.5. I might not like the Steelers to win the game, but these games are always close. The Steelers have won 7 out of their last 8 games in the month of October, and the Browns have failed to cover the spread against the AFC North 8 out of their last 9 games. I think this is a field goal game no matter which way you look at it. I do think the Steelers might pull this off. I really like their defense a little bit more. I just don't believe in that quarterback that can't throw the ball more than 5 yards. But as far as my other game, I love the Cowboys line at minus 2.5. I smashed that line. Some sites have it down to 1.5, which I feel like is a steal. I really do. This Vikings team does this every year. They play better than anybody expects them to play. And then they just kind of, randomly get in the playoffs and then randomly lose a game. And it's like, oh, we forgot about them all over again. But the Vikings have failed to cover the spread in 6 of their last 7 games at home. And the Cowboys are coming in hot off the bye and winning 5 straight after losing. Everybody seems to forget their loss. The only loss is to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on opening night, which they probably should have won that game. But I really like the Cowboys in this game. I really do think they do some damage. My other bet is Dolphins and Bills over 49.5. The Dolphins are averaging 22 points a game over the last 5 weeks. I do think a lot of their points are stemming from some garbage time areas, but it doesn't really matter how the points are scored. It just matters the points are scored. And the Bills are averaging 37.4 over the last 5. I do think that this game might not be close, but I think it might be a blowout. But 49 points seems very logical. I do think when the Bills are connecting on every cylinder, and I do think they're coming off that bye as well, which they're also coming off that loss, which was a little bit of a rough one for them. 5 of the last 6 games of the Bills and Dolphins have hit the over. With that being said, I like the bet. It's minus 165. Dolphins over 1.5 touchdowns scored in the game. With that being said, obviously that correlates very well for me because 49. I haven't hit the 49.5 over. I believe it does hit. So them scoring over 1.5 touchdowns is a nice, juicy little bet. I like the Jets over 1.5 touchdowns. I understand they don't have a quarterback, They do have January Joe coming in there, I think, to play this week, but I still think they get over the 2 touchdowns. It is Cincinnati. I like Cincinnati. I like what they're doing. They're in the same boat with me as Arizona. Arizona's got a little bit more depth to them. They've got a little bit better of a back end, but Cincinnati, man, they put a shellacking on the Ravens. I didn't see that one coming one bit, but honestly, it surprised me, and I love to see it. I love Joe Burrow. I've loved Joe Burrow. I was the president of the Joe Burrow fan club when he was in college, so it's nice to see them, and also nice to see that front office take stock in what their quarterback said in saying, please draft me Jamar Chase, when mostly 99% of the community was like, draft that offensive lineman who has struggled. Sue has struggled up there in Detroit, but I mean, everybody's struggling in Detroit. Last 2 plays for you guys. I like the Bears over 1.5 touchdowns. I don't think the Bears ever will score touchdowns. It's a thing. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what their field's like. I don't know what they're consistently sending out there each and every week. Matt Nagy should be fired, but the Bears aren't a typical franchise that will fire a coach in the midseason, so that's why I think that he still has a job. I don't think Nagy's going to be on the field this week because he tested positive for COVID, so I don't think he's going to be out there on the football field. Probably a good thing. So we might see a little bit of a breakout for the Bears. I don't hate the Bears in that game either. I don't hate the Bears potentially winning that football game. I know it's not exactly the sexiest bet per se, but the 49ers have not looked good this year, and I don't know if that's going to change at all. And my last bet for the week is Sam Darnold over 1.5 touchdown passes. This team has looked terrible after starting hot. Fox and I were on the show very early on that we're very optimistic about the start of the Panthers. And I do think that people underestimate how much CMC does for that offense. The points per game, it helps Sam Darnold. And it's not all on Sam Darnold. He is making some bonehead mistakes, but CMC is one of those guys, right? You take him off of a team, and we saw what happened. I feel like we see what happened with him if you took Derrick Henry off the Titans. You know what I mean? I think CMC is probably the best complete back in football. And I just really do. And he's not able to stay healthy the last 2 years. He's been on and off the football field. Hopefully he's back on there soon. But with that being said, the Panthers are playing in Atlanta. Atlanta's defense isn't good either. You saw what Tua went out there and looked like Dan Marino in the second half. So I think the over on the 1.5 touchdown passes is at plus 115. You get some juice on that dollar there. So I like that as well. So those are the 7 plays. I'll recap like I do each and every week. Next week, I've been on a little bit of a heater, so hopefully it continues. But those are some of the guys that I like. Any of those bets that really kind of speak out to you, Fox?
Oh, when we get to my sit starts, you and I are on opposite page for Sam Darnold.
I just don't think that. Honestly, I just don't think that the Falcons defense isn't good, and that's just. I don't know if Sam Darnold is playing really good right now either. I just really feel like that 2 touchdowns isn't much to ask against a defense that's not very good. So with that being said, go ahead and kick us off with your starts for week 8.
Yeah, so my starts for week 8 at quarterback, I'm going with Daniel Jones. They get the Chiefs defense, which has not been good. Daniel Jones is actually QB 16 on the season, and that's been despite having a lot of his weapons missing. They're tracking toward having Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney back this week. No matter how you feel about those guys, I think we'd all agree they might be a step up over Dante Pettis. Still no Barkley, but Daniel Jones has tried to do his best to bridge that gap, and I think he can get into the top 12 playing a Chiefs defense this week. Running back, I like Khalil Herbert. He was really good his first week splitting time with Damian Williams, and then he's been really great the last 2 weeks. He had over 100 yards rushing against a stout Tampa Bay front last week, despite the fact that his quarterback was a one-man turnover machine. I don't think they're going back to Damian Williams leading that committee. I think it's Herbert's job while David Montgomery is gone. And it's fair to wonder what percentage of the snaps Herbert's going to take even when Montgomery comes back. He's been really good. I think he finishes at least in the RB2 range this week. So he's a start for me. A.J. Brown we were worried after a while. It seemed like he and the Titans pass offense had been left for dead. He's starting to heat up. Maybe food poisoning was the best thing that could have ever happened to him. He looked really good torching the Chiefs last week. I do not think the Colts back end defense is that impressive. I think this is going to be more of an up-tempo game. I expect him to be up in wide receiver 1 territory again. My tight end start, Kyle Pitts, another guy got off to a little bit of a slow start. I was one of the people that thought Calvin Ridley had the potential to be the wide receiver 1 for 2021, but it looks like the big explosive plays are all going to Pitts. He's had 2 games over 100 yards in a row. Carolina's defense is probably stronger on the outside at corner than it is up the middle. I think that's a good sign for Pitts, and I think he keeps it rolling. Ridley has turned into more of a possession receiver. I've started to moderate expectations down to being more of a wide receiver 2 range for him. I think Pitts is probably the one that's going to have the more explosive plays, because we've seen Ridley, his longest play the entire year is 22 yards. It's just a different – Pitts is playing the explosive role to Ridley playing the possession receiver, almost the same way we saw Julio Jones being kind of the main possession guy, while Ridley was the over-the-top game breaker in the past. So a little bit of a flip there. I like Kyle Pitts. I have him as tight end 3 for the week.
Yeah, I am on the same wavelength with one of those plays with you, and I'll go over that in just a second. One of the guys that I like this week is Carson Wentz. Big fan on Carson Wentz. And then let me remind you at home there, I base my start sits off of DFS where Matthew – and I mean, also, I don't mind starting some of these guys in regular fantasy football as well, but I'm going to give you some dollar amounts here. Carson Wentz is $5,700 on DraftKings this week, which is a very cheap price for a guy that's producing 17, 26, 17, and 21 points over his last couple of games. I think that he's an easy play this week. The Titans back end is not that good. I just feel like that we're due for a Titan setback. I'm waiting for it. But I also feel like the secondary is just not good. They're not good. And I feel like they did the right thing by blasting the Chiefs in the mouth last week and then just kind of letting the rest of their offense kind of set the tone. And they just couldn't cover A.J. Brown. They just could not cover A.J. Brown. He looked unstoppable last week. I love what we saw out of him. I'm on the same page with you with Khalil Herbert. There was some concern with him not playing, with Damian Williams playing last week, like you said, and he just was not existent. He just did not exist. In a game where they lost 38-3, he still put up the 100 yards, which is that's impressive enough for me. For those of you at home that have the 100-yard bonus, he clipped it just a little bit, just over it. One of the things that I did love the most about that game was he did see some passing catches as well. He caught 5 balls. That's one of the things that I loved about it as well. You got to have the multifaceted running backs, but I mean, in a week where running backs are awful this year, in my opinion, they're just not good right now. Right receiver start of the week for me is Deontay Johnson. Dude's a stud, especially on fantasy or on DraftKings. He's $6,700. I mean, looking at a guy that's got 18, 15, 24, 22, 14. When it comes to points in fantasy, it's not as much as you would love for his price this week, but you're talking about a guy that's getting double-digit targets in every single game. Now, the one game he didn't have the double-digit target was against Denver, but he had 2 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown in that game. So he ended up just fine. I love Deontay Johnson. The Browns, I don't buy the Browns. I just don't. I've been bullish, optimistic on the Browns from day one. They could prove me wrong again, and I wouldn't mind it. Last guy, the tight end that I didn't want to love in New England. I'm going back to that well again. That's Hunter Henry. The wrong tight end keeps breaking out on me. It's breaking my heart each and every week. But this guy's found the end zone 4 straight weeks. And tight ends are not easy to come by right now, with injuries, with just inconsistent play. Henry's got 10+ points in 4 straight games. He's averaging around 4 or 5 targets a game, which you can't ask for more from a tight end right now. You really can't. And his value on DraftKings is $4,200. The Chargers can be passed on. They can. And it's just at the end of the day they can. And it seems to be that Henry is being looked at in the red zone, and that's the most important part of trying to find yourself a tight end. So, and he's only $4,200. I mean, between these guys, you're looking at, that's 57, 54, 67. Obviously, Deontay Johnson being that big price up, but some of these guys let you plug in some of these other more expensive guys. But on the flip side of that, my sit guys of the week, the guys that I don't like this week, I don't like Teddy Bridgewater. His price is cheap. I'd rather pay for Carson
Just
Wentz.
in general.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that either. I've seen some people that really kind of like Teddy B this week. I'm not a big fan of him this week. I really just don't feel like it's going to happen. Myles Gaskin's $5,600. I mean, you literally can get Khalil Herbert for $5,400. Myles Gaskin, don't get me wrong, Myles Gaskin will probably go out here, rush for 250 yards and 6 touchdowns this week after not seeing the ball again, much less. I don't know what they're doing.
Not against Buffalo.
Well, yeah, I know, but I'm just sarcastically putting it out there because when I say Gaskin should be on the sit chart, he goes out there and normally breaks out.
Well, that was when I said to sit Gaskin. He had 10 receptions for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I was like, did you just literally flip me off every time you caught the ball? Or what?
It blew my mind. It's insane kind of what's transpiring with that entire offense. I really just don't understand what is going on. T. Higgins, he's been consistent enough, but this week they play the Jets. I really feel like this is a game where we're going to see how good the Bengals are, okay? And I know you're like, oh, but they're playing the Jets. Yeah, but they need to get the job done, right? They need to beat the Jets by 20. You know what I mean? I really feel that way. They need to go out there and tear the mouth out the Jets. Should they? Yes. Will they is the real question because you have a team like Tennessee went out there and crap the bet against the Jets, and then they go out back-to-back weeks and beat Buffalo and Kansas City. But you've got to get the job done no matter what you are doing. The tight end I don't really like. He is cheap this week, and I know he's been a little bit more consistent over the last few weeks. But at $4,500, you have Taylor Higbee. They're playing the Texans, and I know they throw the ball no matter how many points they got on the football field. I just don't love this matchup. He did have 8 targets last week against Detroit. I just felt like Stafford was a little bit more of a man on the mission last week than not that he's not every week, but playing his old team, I feel like he was a little bit more of a man on the mission. I don't see him getting around, and he's averaging 9.6, 8.6, 9.4 of the last 3. It's not great. He might be touchdown dependent, but again, if I compare his 4,500 versus Hunter Henry's 4,200, give me Hunter Henry every day of the week. So those are my sits for the week. What about you, Mr. Fox?
Yeah, and to go back to your starts for a minute, low-key underrated Hunter Henry. It's a little bit of a revenge game coming back to the team he played for with Johnny Smith banged up. And I looked it up. Khalil Herbert, the last 3 weeks, which is the only weeks that they've allowed him to touch the ball, he is RB13 for weeks 5 to 7. So definitely a guy worth putting in there. Gaskin does not have anywhere close to.
Yeah, and I love that. Like he went from 0 catches to 2 catches to 5 catches this week. So he's getting those passing down catches as well, which is very, very important too.
So my sits this week, my quarterback sit is Sam Darnold. I was hoping the change of scenery would do good things, and he looked good early, but he is turning the ball over so much and struggling so much. Last week should have been a get-right game against the Giants defense that isn't that great, and he only put up 3 points, ended up getting benched for P.J. Walker. It's been rumored they're looking at quarterback options. Maybe the benching will light him on fire, and he will catch back up, and that'll be great. I think that's part of what Ricky's betting on this week. It's not a terrible matchup. I just don't have any confidence that Sam Darnold has any confidence. He looked an awful lot like the guy that said he was seeing ghosts when he was with the Jets. My running back sit, Mike Davis. This was one of the most interesting signings this offseason. It seemed like there was absolutely no competition in Atlanta, and Arthur Smith said, hold my beer, I've got Cordero Patterson. Matthew Berry said he was going to be the guy in 2008, and I want to make that happen. So Cordero Patterson is borderline RB1, and Mike Davis looks like he's maybe a glorified handcuff. Last week was brutal, only 10 yards on 4 carries. He actually seems to be seeing his role in the offense phase down. Wide receiver sit is Jerry Jeudy. It's not a bad matchup going against Washington. A lot of people are bullish that now that Judy's back, he's going to be a wide receiver 1. I don't think that Denver focuses enough on a single receiver to make that happen. They spread the ball around. They have 2 or 3 receivers they're going to use. I actually think it could be a big game for Fant because Washington has really brutally struggled with tight ends over the middle. I also think they want to run the ball. And like Ricky, I'm not entirely bullish on Teddy Bridgewater or this team putting up Patrick Mahomes like Patrick passing numbers against Washington. I think Judy is a fine play if you're looking for a flex wide receiver 3. If you think you're getting a top tier, top 24 wide receiver, I don't see it happening. And then my tight end sit is Evan Ingram. Even when the Giants have had 0 receiving options, last week they were down to Dante Pettis and John Ross as receivers. Evan Ingram still can't manage to get used. They still have Kyle Rudolph, who gets more red zone looks than Ingram. People are hoping that maybe the Giants are going to try to prop up Ingram's trade value. I think he has 0 trade value. I don't think there's anything to prop up. I do not trust him. I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't even top 25, but he's certainly not going to be top 12 in my opinion.
Yeah, he's don't get me wrong. I feel like if you introduce him to a new system, there's a strong possibility that maybe he does do something. You know what I mean? I can believe that. You know what I mean? I can believe in the fact that he can go somewhere and be something. I just don't see it definitely with the quarterback they have there, and I don't foresee them being able to utilize the strengths of weapons that they do have there. And I understand the big thing is they haven't been very healthy. That offensive line is atrocious. And Daniel Jones has played a lot better than expected, but he's kind of come back down to reality a little bit as well after the first couple of weeks where he was probably the best quarterback in fantasy football. But with that being said, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. So over the last couple of weeks, obviously we've seen a lot of debate back and forth about certain quarterbacks. Has the fantasy community really forgotten to blur the line out of what a good quarterback versus what a good fantasy quarterback is? Obviously, I'm talking about Jalen Hurts. You know what I mean? Like, we appreciate garbage time points, but people seem to forget, especially like dynasty values. I don't see a whole lot of dynasty value in Jalen Hurts, while other people are like, I think that he's whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's kind of the question. I mean, the Eagles haven't been great as a team, and we haven't really seen him maybe come up in those big moments. The fair thing that was pointed out is you're talking about a guy who still has only had 11 career starts and maybe doesn't have the most talented team around him. Some of the things that perhaps we forgave about the way quarterback was played by Lamar Jackson because the Ravens were winning, people are less forgiving of Hurts because the Eagles haven't been successful, because I think he's 3-8 or 3-9 as a starter. But it's not a great team. I wasn't very bullish on the Eagles to begin with. I think Hurts has had a better statistical season than I expected. He's made some okay plays. I don't know. I don't watch enough Philly to know if we're seeing the progression, but I think we've seen for a long time there is a huge gulf. Blake Bortles is probably the perfect example. He was a fantastic fantasy quarterback for a few years there. He was quarterback 4 1 year, quarterback 5 or 6 the next year. Jaguars weren't a good team. They had 1 year where they kind of rose up and surprised make the AFC Championship. I didn't think that had a lot to do with Bortles. He was a guy that they had no intention of keeping as a franchise quarterback because of what they saw. And that's where you have to be careful. I think it's probably a pivotal year for Jalen Hurts while they're trying to decide. It's a crucial year for guys like Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones. And you might look at Sam Darnold, he's QB 14 on the year. He's had some decent rushing numbers. But if you're actually watching the games and listening to the coach, who's been very critical, I would say the one thing for Jalen Hurts is I have not heard his coach be as publicly critical of him. Maybe they're recognizing that they don't have a great team or a great infrastructure in place. That's the problem with Dynasty. For redraft, these guys are probably going to be fine this year, but I was urging caution on some of these guys for Dynasty because you really don't know what their value is going to be beyond this year. I think it's the same with, Teddy Bridgewater, by all accounts, is having a career year for himself. I don't think he's a starter in 2022. So while it's fine to have him in a Superflex league this year and he's probably putting up okay numbers for you, that's a sunk value if you're looking to the future. If you're building your future on Sam Darnold and Teddy Bridgewater and Daniel Jones, you might have a problem in a few months.
Yeah, and I think the thing about it is there's few factors. What some people seem to forget sometimes is this Eagles team is not committed to Jalen Hurts, right? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they got rid of Wentz, but they're going to end up getting a first-round pick for Wentz. But with Hurts, there's no obligation to keep this. Like, this regime was not the one that was like draft Jalen Hurts. I always thought that the drafting of him was a mistake anyway. I don't think he's a good quarterback. I truly don't think that he's a good quarterback.
Well, and supposedly in this last draft, if they thought that they could get the guy that they wanted, they supposedly wanted Trey Lance or Wilson. Yep. If they thought they could get one of those guys, they would have done that instead of what they did. It was just they didn't like their options. So those are a red flag. Jared Goff would be another one. He hasn't been horrific, but he's a placeholder. You probably have this year and next year, and by then, and even next year could be a transition. Jimmy G the same way. It's quarterback's a very fungible position. There's probably only 10 or 12 guys you can feel rock solid about their future.
And at the end of the day, the other thing for me is this draft class in the NFL coming out for quarterbacks is not very good. It's not last year's teams. Like, there's some bad quarterbacks. I haven't dove super deep, but I do know the names. And I
turn the franchise over to Spencer Rattler.
I do know that. Oh, so he probably won't come out, but the thing about it is these guys. There's not that guy this year, right? There's not that guy. Not that I have seen yet, right? And once I dial into the tape a little bit more, I will. But I've studied the guys that are playing right now for 4 years now with Stoops when we used to do the W Delight, so I know the names. It's just I don't see the guys that are coming out, ready to go. I got offered DeAndre Hopkins for DJ Moore straight up. What do you guys think? Hopkins all day for me.
In redraft, I would do Hopkins. I think in Dynasty, I'd probably keep Moore.
And one last note as well. If you can, and I'm not speaking to this person's off the field matters, right? You know what I mean? But we live very much in a world where fantasy football, that's what we talk about here, right? Mm-hmm. If you can acquire Deshaun Watson, I would do it. And I say this because, and I feel the same way of why some teams are tinkering with the idea of potentially acquiring him. His value will never be lower ever than it is right now. Okay? Like ever, right? Because he's got the baggage right now, right? So once we get past the baggage will always be there. I understand that what he did, and whatever he did, I'm not talking about that. Football wise, he will be back on the football field. And when he is one of the best quarterbacks in this league. You know what I mean? He is a top 10 to 12 quarter. He probably is. He's a top 10 quarterback in this league. And he did it on a team that didn't always have substantial weapons. So if you look at just a few of the options that have been rumored, Philadelphia has weapons for days. Miami has weapons for days. I don't feel like we're going to have a lower moment in the world of fantasy football to acquire this quarterback than right now. Yeah. So if you have the opportunity, I feel like, and you can buy low on them. You can. I've seen it. I've seen them in a couple different leagues. I've been seeking offers. I picked them up in a couple different leagues just because of the rumors of him possibly getting traded. And they're saying if he gets traded, he's going to play.
Well, and the other thing I think that we're really going to have to watch this offseason is 2021 draft was quarterback rich, where we had supposedly these sure things that couldn't miss. We've seen all 5 of them start at some point already this season. And in most cases, it's been more of a work in progress than, I think we saw what a Justin Herbert and a Joe Burrow did, what a Kyler Murray did in the last couple of years. And people thought, well, it's, you get one of these rookie quarterbacks and it's going to be to the moon. Those guys are looking more like special cases. Even a guy that we liked his talent, like a Tua, struggled a little bit in his rookie year, has not been great. I know you, but I mean, most people thought he'd at least be a decent pro, even if you didn't like him. Among Bruning was all in on Herbert, and that's turned out to be
me too,
to be great. But we haven't seen them be these sure bets. So if you're talking about now going into a draft with prospects that maybe are considered less robust, you might actually see a guy like a Hurts or a Jones get more of a chance because they're like, hey, the devil or you take one of these rookies in a second or third round and see what kind of competition you can get. Do they try to find some of these veterans to bring in? There's a reason teams are still trading for Joe Flacco. I mean, it's a tough position out there right now. And you have other teams like Pittsburgh who are probably going to be good enough not to bottom out for a quarterback pick, but who definitely have to do something at their position.
Yeah, so just like hypothetically running through the list of the names, right? You have Houston that's going to need a quarterback because they're going to trade Watson. Watson's gone, period, right? You know what I mean? Tennessee's going to have to start looking soon. I really feel that way. They're going to have to start looking soon. Okay, so Pittsburgh's got a huge decision to make. Cleveland's got a huge decision to make. I don't think
Tampa Bay potentially. I mean, Brady looks great, but there's no guarantee that.
Yeah. So you have Denver. What happens in I think Derek Carr's outlook looks a little bit better now with Gruden gone. I feel a little bit more comfortable with him there. But and I mean, looking at Miami, their quarterback situation could open up the rest of the AFC. Let's see here. Washington, Philadelphia, the Giants. Let's see here. Minnesota could be murky. I know Cousins' contract ends in like a year or two. So, and what do they do there? If they fire Zimmer, what does that look like for Cousins? You know what I mean? I don't really feel like Zimmer likes Cousins anyway, but that's beside the point. Detroit, obviously, like you said, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina. Like that whole division could be looking at quarterbacks. You're looking at probably 12 to 14 teams that over the next year or two are going to be looking at quarterbacks. There's not 12 to 14 good quarterbacks in the next two draft classes. Not yet, right? You know what I mean? We can't speak for another following season because you might see a Joe Burrow come onto the scene, but some of the more recent quarterbacks have them good. Miami's going to live with the decision of drafting Tua over Herbert for the rest of their lives, right? You know what I mean? It's going to be
especially
that
since they tanked
right
for Tua.
Tanked for Tua. And I was on record saying that Tua would not be a good starting quarterback in football. I never thought that. I just feel like he's a very good college quarterback. There's certain guys that don't translate, and he just to me was one of those guys. He's looked good at times. I'm not going to say that he hasn't. But we're also in a league where it's if we draft and you don't do good within the first 2 years, teams aren't willing to take a chance on. But as you said, a guy like Tua, because he was drafted so high, because he does have that talent, if Miami just gives up, he's going to get a chance elsewhere, right? When that rumored 3-team trade was being chattered about in the NFL, where Watson was going to go to Miami, Tua was going to flip and go to Washington, right? Jalen Hurts is going to get another shot at being a quarterback if Philadelphia gives up on him, right? You know what I mean? He's going to get another shot. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes down to Houston. I still think that's a possibility if they give up on him in Philadelphia. Daniel Jones has looked decent enough that the Giants might move on, but he might go get to compete for a job, right? You know what I mean? That's a possibility, right? You know, he might not get a starting job, but he's going to compete for a job, right? So there's options. As you said, there's positions that are going to be open, and the teams that are giving up on players are definitely going to be bringing them into their systems and seeing if they can make them work. There's maybe 12 to 14 teams right now set on quarterbacks, at least through 2022, right? Past that, we're not, we can't make any projections past that because, teams flip like a dime all the time. But went a little longer than I expected, but I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that stuff. I do think that we got quarterback-wise, we're in a whirlwind of events. I think this offseason is going to be a lot of fun because I think there's a lot of questions that could potentially be answered on that grand scheme of things. But with that being said, we are taking a look at our favorite segment of each and every week. All of our segments are our favorites, so that's why I say that. Calm down, everybody listening at home. But the movie corner, right out the gate, we'll keep this one a little short this week just because we went a little bit long. But quick thoughts on your new favorite movie of the year, Dune.
Yeah, and I did my review out yesterday. Visually, it's incredible. Denis Villeneuve is a fantastic visual storyteller. I thought the performances were okay. Jason Momoa was actually my favorite, which is probably the biggest, most shocking moment of 2021 for me so far, because he hasn't always been my favorite actor. I really liked what he did in that part. I thought he was one of the more lighthearted and fun things in a movie that is mostly overly somber in tone. This is the first half of the story. I have not read the books, but I have seen the 1984 David Lynch film, which is an experience. I'll leave it at that. This one lets the story breathe a little bit more, was probably easier to follow. That being said, it is an incredibly dense and dry narrative, and I think that is a little bit why for me, an emotional connection with characters is really essential to raising a film up, and I did not feel that. While I was blown away by some of the filmmaking, the character wasn't enough. I'm still interested to see Dune Part 2. I didn't hate the film, but I definitely didn't love it. I think it's a technical masterpiece, but overall, it was okay.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm in the same boat. You know, I loved everything about the film other than the lack of emotions. If they gave me just a little bit of emotion, just a little bit, I might have liked it a little bit more. I really like Timothée Chalamet. I know you didn't. I felt like this is easy his best performance, which isn't saying a whole lot. He doesn't have a whole lot of performances that I think that are great. I really did like him in the film. But the one thing that I did appreciate about the film, outside of the technical aspect of things, I walked away wanting a sequel, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't mind. Like, for me, when you watch certain films, you're like, I hope that never. Like, if I would have walked away and be like, oh, that's getting a sequel, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't walk away.
Well, see, and I think that's because, so I really thought about this. I don't think Timothée Chalamet was bad. I guess I didn't mean to convey that, but
No.
so much of this story is built around his character of Paul and Paul's potential to be this prophesied savior with what happens to Jason Momoa's character a little bit, because you start to see some of the characters that maybe were a little more interesting. Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, those guys, you know, I haven't read the book, so maybe they miraculously come back, but you're left with the impression that they were in this movie, but probably aren't in the future. You don't really get enough of Zendaya to get any kind of a feel for how she's going to be or what their chemistry is going to be. But a lot of it is predicated on you being invested in Paul. And I actually thought the first version of this film, where Kyle MacLachlan was in that role and it was his first big film role, I had a similar problem. Like, I wasn't invested in that character per se. And if you're not, I think that's where you sever the emotional connection. And for me, I started to wonder, is it the character and the story, or is it the person?
Yeah, for sure. Also out this week, Colin in Black and White. I'm interested to see that. I really can't wait to check that out on Netflix. Also, Army of Thieves drops tomorrow. I really enjoyed it. I was not a fan of Army of the Dead. I just thought the Army of the Dead was just okay. This is definitely the polar opposite of that film. Like, it's the prequel to Army of the Dead, how we got to where we were going with the Army of the Dead. I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's a great film by any means, but I did think that it's a good little heist film that's easy to enjoy. Last Night in Soho comes out in theaters this weekend. I really, really like 2/3 of that movie, and then the third act is just abysmal, and it saves itself just a little bit, but that movie had the chance to be one of the year's best films, and it left a sour taste in my mouth. Not a huge fan of how it turned out. That's, I think, the big ones coming out this week. Next week is the big week, is a huge week. Huge week. If you haven't caught A Harder They Fall, that drops on Wednesday. This coming up Wednesday on the streaming platform Netflix there. I really like that one. If you're a fan of Westerns, I think that you'll like it. Next Friday, Spencer comes out. Spencer is still one of my favorite movies of the year, so it's only coming out in theaters. Highly recommend checking it out. Kristen Stewart gives my favorite performance of the year. But then the much talked about, very divisive film called The Eternals comes out on Friday. A lot of people don't like this movie, and I am baffled by it because going into the film, I had less expectations for this movie than I did Dune. Like, I'll be honest. The one thing that I really was excited about is Chloe Zhao. I think she is a breathtaking director, writer, storyteller, visually storytelling, especially with Nomadland. If you watch Nomadland from last year, that's one of Fox and I's favorite films, one of our favorite films of last year. Obviously, one Best Picture and one director and stuff like that. It's one of our favorite films for a reason. She took a very interesting story and gave it a lot of heart. It was very simplistic in some aspects, but she told the story in a way that was just beautifully crafted. And I felt that. Everything that the people that love Dune, that claim to feel from Dune, I felt from Eternals. I feel like it's the most grounded story that we've ever seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I say it's the best made Marvel movie of all time. It's not my favorite of all time. It's the best made Marvel movie of all time. I just feel like everything about it is really good. It's very divisive. A lot of people it's got a very terrible Rotten Tomatoes score right now already. But defy those odds. Go see this film with an open mind because the direction's great. The performances are great. And at the end of the day, I don't read comic books and I don't read books. The biggest difference that I felt in Dune, I felt like Dune was made for the people that read the book. And I felt like Eternals was made for everybody. And to me, you have to make a film. If you're adapting a film from a book, you have to go into it knowing that there's going to be a certain percentage of your audience that has not read the book. So you have to please both sides. And I know that's hard, right? But when you have a spectacle like Dune, you need to be able to reel in your average audience on top of the book fans. And I feel the same way about comic books. I don't know anything about any of these comic book characters outside of what's presented to me. So whatever's presented to me, that's what I love. So if I like it, I'm going to relate to it. And the story within the Eternals is multifaceted. It's representation, which is beautiful. The representation in it reminds me of what people felt with Black Panther. The representation is going to matter to individuals, little boys, little girls across the world watching this film. But at the end of the day, it has heart. And I loved the story within the story within the story. There's a lot of introduction to a lot of different characters, but it worked for me. I loved every moment of it. So go see Eternals.
Plus, Jon Snow gets to be back with his brother Rob.
Well, the funny thing about it is, one of the funny things is, and this is not a spoiler because you see it in the trailer, but listening to him say, "I love Cersei" in the movie is very weird, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's just, it was weird to me just listening to that, right? You know what I mean? It's just funny to me listening to him say that throughout the entirety, like through in the film at all. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you'll get the reference whenever you see it, but everybody's fantastic in the film. Richard Madden, he gives a damn good performance in this movie. Like, I loved his character. I love the arcs of some of his character. Kumail is amazing. I could just go on and on about this film. We got a podcast releasing on Sunday where Jacob and I reviewed the movie, and it was nice to be on the opposite. Typically, Jacob's the one that loves and I hate a film, but we talked for 25 minutes, and I'll tell you how much I love The Eternals. The Eternals is one of my top 5 movies of all time inside the MCU. That's how much I love The Eternals. It really is. I think I have it at 2 or 3 all time. And
it'll be fun. You and I tend to be similar. You and I were similar on Dune, where Amanda and Jacob were on the other end, and they were similar on Eternals. Be funny if we end up. Then we're gonna have to have an Eternals versus Dune throw down.
God, again, this is the conversation. This is the conversation. Dune, no emotion. Eternals, emotion. Book closed. So So that, with that being said, guys, there's loads of content out there to watch. Oh, what did I?
Yes, and If
Comes out.
like me, you are a purveyor of Hallmark Christmas movies. They came back in earnest last weekend. My wife, big on the Hallmark Christmas movie train. I will be doing when I put out my weekly film reviews, which I do on Wednesdays. I will be having my Hallmark movie corner. Sometimes they're not good. Sometimes they're entertaining. Sometimes they have a flaw that pisses me off so much that I have to live tweet, which is what happened a few years ago when they couldn't bother to consult Google Maps and set up a location in Colorado talking about Littleton being a 4-hour drive up the mountain from Denver when actually it's a 20-minute suburb to the south. Sometimes it will set me off, and I have lots to say. This week, pretty decent films. We got perhaps the final Hallmark Christmas movie from Miss Winnie Cooper herself, Danica McKellar, called You, Me, and the Christmas Trees, about an arborist that falls in love with a farmer. There are worse ways to spend a Saturday night, especially in the heart of football season and award season when you're trying to maintain a marital relationship.
I've got nothing to say to that. Also dropping on Wednesday is Finch. Tom Hanks. Friday is Finch. I have seen it. I can't say anything other than this about it. And those of you at home, my thumbs up. So I enjoyed it. But that's all I can really say about that. So I don't want to get in trouble because my review of it will drop on Tuesday. But very excited to see what people think about that. If you like Tom Hanks acting at a wall or a robot, then, it's no different than any of his other movies. But it's like I Am Legend and Chappie, except for in castaway terms. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. Check out the other shows on the Drive-In Podcast Network, from the Uncut Podcast Show, the Wrestling Show, our latest addition to the Drive-In Podcast Network, Film Optics, 50 Years of Music, the Now Showing Podcast, and, of course, the Music City Drive-In, where you can check out Matthew Fox and I's latest work in the world of film, sports, and entertainment, and any other thing that we want to talk about, and Hallmark specials. So we'll talk to you guys later.